Really,
We are live.
we're live. Appropriation, April 7th, FY27 budget. So, should the treasurer's office. Deputy treasurer here, that way. So I'll let you introduce yourself for the record and get some questions about the House bill that involves the treasurer's office. We know there's an omnibus bill, but it's other funding. Some of what's in the budget, but not all in the House bill.
Yes, I'm happy to answer questions. David Chair, for the record, Deputy Treasurer. And my plan today had been to talk about the treasurer's the asks that are contained within the treasurer's omnibus bill, some of which are in the House budget, a couple of which are not. I will go through in order here, starting the first two, where these were some positions. We had 3 position asks. One of them did make it in the House budget, 2 did not.
So this is online, it's the omnibus request.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then the third one is contemplated and as passed by the House, third request on this omnibus piece. All these first 3 are non-general fund asks. And then there is a final ask about a pension and benefits funding task force that would be one-time general fund money. So I will, if it pleases the committee, I'll run through those in order, try to keep it concise, and happy to answer any questions as always.
Okay.
So starting with the physician requests, these are not impacting the general, or they are non-general fund asks. First 2 here are 2 positions in the unclaimed property division. As passed by the House, they did give us 1 of these 2 positions. I'll explain briefly our need for them. The unclaimed property division has operated with essentially the same staffing level for FTEs for well over 20 years. We actually believe it's more than 25 years. The workload in that time has risen dramatically. We have the data here for 20 years ago and the most recent fiscal year. The transactions for an employee, and these include both claims that people are asking for and also remittances, holder deposits that are coming into the unclaimed property fund. It went from just under 2,500 to more than 8,700. And so the staff are handling 3.5 times the volume of transactions they were 20 years ago, same number of employees. The 2 additional positions would allow for a reduction to 5,800, which you don't need to remember all those numbers. But the point here is that staff would still be handling more than twice the number of transactions per employee, even with those 2 additional FTEs. So we're not asking for like the Cadillac treatment here, the luxury treatment, just trying to bring the workload in line. And want to repeat, the unclaimed property division is entirely self-funding.
Yeah, just before we move on, when you say transaction per employee, what does that consist of time-wise?
I mean, they can vary, admittedly. Sometimes the claims are fairly straightforward. Pro forma, it's a small number of dollars that somebody's claiming. It can go out very quickly with relatively little review, but the volume does add up. And as we've gone forward, and I'll explain a little bit more coming up, the complexity has increased over the years in terms of both what, the amount of remittances we're getting in from large organizations and corporations, as well as fraud detection, frankly, which these unclaimed property funds, not just in Vermont, but actually have become more of a target for fraud. And we are having to implement more safeguards and additional, more extensive practices to guard against that. And so part of the hope here is that these positions will assist with holder outreach and compliance efforts. They'll ensure the timely and accurate reporting, detect and defeat fraud, and also want to know that increased compliance, in other words, making sure that people are remitting claims that they should be, remitting holdings that they should be remitting to the fund. Will support program operations, obviously under returns, and also better compliance oversight has the benefit of generating more income for the state, meaning that previously unreported or underreported property is brought into the fund. So those are the unclaimed property positions. Again, happy to answer questions or expand on this. Just want to be respectful of the committee's time, and I am considering a lot. Moving on to the policy and research manager position in the retirement division. Again, we are an office operating a lean operation here, and these are sort of core state government functions. Vermont has more than 2,800 members we have is their ratio for staff per beneficiary. National median income is less than half of that. And the national median for comparably sized systems, so for a smaller system, is actually even less than that. And that does have a real impact on staff capacity because a lot of what we do is customer service. Beneficiaries need to understand what's happening with their benefits. Things change, and that means phone calls and emails that our staff need to answer, which they do rapidly, but it is a real impact on their workload. The hope here, the plan here is that it would provide, this position would provide additional support, especially with respect to the retiree health insurance supplemental plans. Noting again that the retirement division is funded through administrative fees from the managed funds, not through the general fund. And I did want to note, the retirement division has worked hard to save the state money. In the calendar year 2025, they were quoted an amount for their for the other post-employee benefits, healthcare in this case, that would have raised the premiums by 50%. In a 6-month period, they pivoted to a different health insurance provider for a premium increase of only 16% as opposed to 50%, and that saves the state $20 million per year going forward. That doesn't just happen automatically, though. It doesn't happen, by one signature on a paper. There's a huge amount of administrative work that goes into that, as well as communication with beneficiaries who are seeing their insurer change. And that was a strain on the staff, frankly, but one that saved the state a lot of money. That's a $20 million per year burden that will not have to be met by this committee and the legislature. And the hope is that with a bit of increased capacity, we'll be able to make sure we are spotting and utilizing those opportunities, as healthcare is one of the fastest growing costs across the state, of course, in every sector, but part of the burden that the retirement divisions are dealing with as well. So again, happy to answer questions.
Was that in the House budget?
What that?
Was that in the House budget?
That was not in the House budget. In the House budget, we have one unclaimed property position.
Do you know why they found this position? Or didn't allow you to use, because this is from retirement funds.
That's correct. It's no general fund impact.
Which, unlike your first piece, that money, if you hire someone, you just don't transfer as much to the general fund. This doesn't come back and hit the general fund at all.
That's true. In this one, there was truly no general fund impact. We would argue that the general fund impact on the unclaimed property piece is at best very small. The funds on average over the last 10 years.
But what you don't spend in there does end up going to the general fund.
That is true. And we believe that with more staffing capacity, there will be more remittances and more claims coming in, and that it will pay for itself in terms of compliance, which will mean there's more money coming in, and that will also mean there's more money being transferred to the general fund. And I would just note, over the last 10 years, the unclaimed property fund transfer to the general fund has exceeded the budgeted amount by an average of over $3 million. So
No, that was that.
So we are, your statement is correct, and the budgetary.
But in this one, it has
This one really has no
No.
interaction with the general fund
It has a
whatsoever.
light effect on the pension. Like your cost of managing the pension goes up. There's less
But
money.
yes, there will be over a $8 billion pool of money. There will be this percentage impact. It will be extremely small on that cost, but there will be no general fund interaction. And so I guess I would refer you to the some members of the House Appropriations Committee. I think there were a number that were in support of this, ultimately for the sake of continuing passing the overall budget. This was considered on the final day, and I think they just needed to move on and came to that compromise. But I think I know that there was support in the room for that position.
It's 5, 6, 7 now in Senate come-ups or
It is, yeah. The positions have been stripped out of
they were
5, 6, 7.
everything that's not in the budget stripped out.
Everything was, so all positions were stripped out, and then they put one position in the budget. So the Senate Gov-Ops may or may not discuss the positions, since now I did pass with those in it. It's just the one that just came up with the budget.
Depends on how they pick them out, like if they're left. trail if they took them out or if they just.
I'm not sure what they're gonna end up.
Right, okay.
Yeah, well, we will talk with them about the positions, but I don't know how much they'll take them.
Okay.
So now we're moving on to the unclaimed property transfer to the Vermont Retirement Security Fund. And I should have said at the beginning, I know the treasurer himself gave a presentation to the committee about the overall budget. And so I'm just focusing in on what really these are the asks that are outside of the governor's recommended, which other than these didn't change coming through. So just wanted to note that. That as part of the omnibus bill, there was a proposal to, and this did pass through the House. And this would alter a currently existing unclaimed property fund transfer that goes to the Higher Education Trust Fund. The way it works right now is that any property accounts that are more than 10 years old and worth less than $100 are transferred to the Higher Education Endowment Trust Fund. I do want to note, just for the record, all property is ultimately all unclaimed property is ultimately remains the property of the person who has a claim to it. But as a practical, and we would make them whole, and meet the state of Vermont would make them whole. But as a practical matter, a lot of this money does ultimately go unclaimed. So this has been an existing transfer for many years now. It's a relatively small amount. On the next slide, I'll show you a bit more about that.
Do you know when it started?
I believe it started in the late aughts. I checked with Treasurer Pierce on that, and she believed that it started shortly before she became. So as I say, each year as accounts age from being 9 years old to 10 years old, and they're less than $100, that chunk of money flows into the Higher Education Trust Fund.
Can it flow to theirs and assignees, or does it have to be the person's? So could somebody come back 80 years later and say like that $50 that my grandfather had? I was named
Yeah, it
as
can
well.
flow to, yes,
Okay.
it can flow to somebody who is an heir assignee, in accordance with whatever legal trail exists. They'd have to prove that, but just wanting to give a sense of the scale here, the annual contributions to the Higher Education Trust Fund. On the right, you can see the trailing 5 years of how much this transfer has been worth. It's not a huge amount compared to the body of the fund, which is now $67 million about. So, transfers on the order of a little over 100,000 each year. The highest transfer happened most recently, $147,000. The proposed change is that cap of what would be transferred would be raised from $100 up to $150. This would sweep in some more into what we're proposing, but up to a $300,000 caps, and the total transfer would not exceed $300,000 in any given year. And the idea being that now whatever amount of it was needed to support the Vermont retirement program would go to that, and the remainder would flow into the Higher Education Fund.
So you have a base amount going to savings and then the rest going to the trust fund.
That's exactly right.
And what's the base?
So excuse me, sorry. I will show you the graphs here.
Okay.
So the cap at 300,000, and you can see the retirement. Sorry, let me take another graph.
Pink is the trust fund, blue is the.
Exactly. So we have a projection about how much revenue the Vermont Saves program would be bringing in, and I do want to emphasize this program is active and has been bringing in a fair amount. It's been active for a little over a year, and in that year it's gone from 0 to nearly 6,000 accounts under management and $0 to over 5 million under management. So it is increasing rapidly. We project it will continue to. Those accounts and the assets under management do throw off some fees that we realize. Oh, thank you very much.
You want water?
I got some coffee here, I'm working on, but thank you all. You're very kind. I appreciate it. So you can see here, the projection is that the Vermont Saves program need less and less assistance as it gets more and more revenue. We do have a model, a revenue model that is in your materials and that is posted on the page that supports those projections. I didn't want to put all that in here, but you can look at that. And as time goes on, you can see that a greater and greater amount will return to the higher education trust fund. As the Vermont Saves program needs less and less to become self-sustaining. We project it will be self-sustaining in FY33. But I also note that by FY29, the higher ed trust fund will realize a greater transfer than it is currently.
Because you raised it to $150 per month.
Exactly, yeah.
David, I'm having a hard time reading the numbers on the, is that last pink bar that, or the last two that have no blue, is that 300,000?
That's correct.
Okay.
That hits the cap of the
Yeah.
total transfer, when they transfer the cap.
And then if there's more than 300,000, that's 10 years old and over $150, that would just be part of your active transfer to the general fund in excess.
Yes. Yeah, it just wouldn't come over, or sorry, it wouldn't get included in this transfer. It would remain in the body of the total calculation of what gets transferred into the general fund.
But it hasn't been, we haven't gotten anywhere near 300,000. 140 was the highest.
That's right, not previously. This transfer, it would mean that in the first year, because the first year going from 100 to 150 for everything that's over
That's right.
10 years. So it's all those trailing years as opposed to the 1 year that it is in. So you're looking at a total potential transfer of something like 1.2 million. We didn't want to actually sweep all that in right away. In order to make this sort of, we didn't want to have that volatility and also wanted to make sure that this transfer mechanism works.
Okay.
This is another way of looking at the same thing. Basically, like the total costs of the program divided up among the unclaimed property transfer and the Vermont Saves revenue.
Okay.
And then looking at the impact on the higher ed trust fund, you can see that by FY29, again, it exceeds where it was previously. It then goes up above that. And for the duration of this proposal, the higher ed trust fund will have more money than it would have had this proposal not taken effect.
What happened? Why wasn't there a transfer in 26?
We don't have the numbers for the current fiscal year.
Oh, because
So we just,
Right.
yeah, so I should have said that. Yes, it's one because we don't have the fund.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. So that is the higher ed trust fund transfer. It'll support the Vermont Safe Retirement Program, which again is already in just a year and a little bit grown quite dramatically. Support it up to the point where it's self-sustaining. It'll leave the higher ed trust fund with more money than it currently is getting. And it'll allow this program to grow without an impact on the general, any further impact on the general.
And then your projection is in 20s, whatever. So like, do you think in like 30, FY33, there wouldn't be any money that
That's right.
phase would be?
It would be self-sustaining. Our projection is that it'd be self-sustaining.
But the language, does that give you till 2040 in case things don't work out the way it's planned?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. So there is a bit of room there, which we can discuss if the committee would like, but the intention there was to give a buffer, but we do think that if the trend have continued going along about what our projections have showed, we do think that it'll be self-sustaining.
And it's clear what self-sustaining means, like that's.
Yeah, it just means the revenues will be greater than the costs of running the program. And so we do, on this slide, we project that the program cost will increase at about 4.5% each year. And so accounting for that, we have the transfers that will make up the difference between the revenues and the total cost. And so the penny gives the difference that needs to be made
Is
up.
that your contract? Because you have a contract. Saves program.
That's right. So a contractor called Bestwell is actually administrating, and they earn money off the fees that are built into the program. So both on the number of accounts and also under the total assets under management.
And do you have staff to that get paid through that, or
We do all
contract? That's when you consider the cost of the system is just the contractor's cost system plus admin cost.
the second. So there are admin costs in the treasurer's office to run a good program, and it can't be run solely. We do need local staff who are interacting with businesses and individuals who are participating in the program.
Okay. Yes.
Permission to turn on the work.
If you want to turn on, is that a motion? Yes, vote.
I was just seeking direct permission, but I can put it as a motion.
Strong.
Expected. Okay, all in favor of turning on the light?
No,
I appear to have it.
Yeah, yes, with explanation.
I do understand what you just said.
oh, great. I appreciate you.
Deswell is, Deswell is our contractor for the,
Beside.
529 putting. And because I work for the 529 putting, all of my salary comes out of, on the management contract.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
So it's exactly,
Okay, that's great. So hopefully, I'm happy to answer more questions on that. It's a little bit complex, but we think it is a good way of supporting the program, leaving the higher ed trust fund in a better place than it is now, not impacting the general fund. A lot of bills are mapped to that. Final piece here.
And that, the House budget did include that.
Yes, the House passes that piece. All the committees, they considered it, and the full House passed that. So this is the one general fund piece in the omnibus bill, which is the one-time general fund ask for the amortization task force. Excuse me. The pensions, as we know, are on a closed-end 2038 amortization schedule. So that means that we need to get to the point of fully funding them by 2038. That also means that as you get closer to 2038, the potential volatility in state contributions, the ADAC, the actuarially determined employer contribution, could get much more volatile if there is a significant change in market conditions or some other pension liability, but let's assume market conditions being the most likely source of that volatility. And say if there's a big market crash, to put it plainly, you could end up, the legislature could end up with a very large ADAC payment in order to reach full funding by 2038. If that were to happen in just a few years before 2038, say 2036, 2035, you now just have 3 years over which you're spreading that increased liability, as opposed to if something happened right now, you have, 12 years, 11 years, that you're spreading that increased liability over, so there's more smoothing. But as you get close, very short timeline, could end up with very high ADAC payments if the legislature's on the hook for. And we want to have a discussion about how we can smooth that final bit, if necessary. It may not be necessary, but if necessary, have mechanisms in place that can smooth that final make up to the full funding in order to prevent the worst case scenario, which is that we end up just not funding or not meeting our obligations that we've assigned to ourselves. So we're not making any definitive recommendation. We do have the support of the unions and stakeholders in having this task force do its work. In order to do its work, it does need actuarial services in order to make these projections accurate. It's very complex projections with a lot of moving parts in them. And so we do need to contract those services, and then we would come back with a recommendation. The plan would be to come back to the legislature with a recommendation, how to forestall that potential problem.
And we think part of that is just going to be, well, you don't want to say pushing out the date, but just as we get closer, there's going to be like a grace period for changes that happen in that last 8 years.
I think part of the concept would be to allow for that flexibility if necessary, depending on the conditions.
In the task force is
It would be our office, the union stakeholders, I believe the chairs of appropriations, and Chris Root can correct me if I'm missing anybody, but that's the general lineup.
okay, similar to the earlier pension task force.
It would be very
Secretary of Administration.
Secretary of Administration as well.
Okay, and the 75,000 is a contract for an actuary.
It would primarily cover that. It would also, for folks who qualify for the 30th, it might pay for that, but that's a small, very small amount. The primary amount would be for actuarial services.
Okay, any questions about actuaries?
That just was in the house. Budget as well.
Yeah, I just want to back up a little bit. So full disclosure, I'm on the attorney. So it appears as though the treasurer's office is just asking for a blessing for these monies that really haven't been allocated or appropriated. They want to be used through the no retirement division to create his position. So I guess my question is, can we do this legally? Use monies that were contributed by members and so on and so forth that actually take money out to create a position?
It is how we currently fund the entire retirement division, and I believe most of VPEG, if not all of VPEG, which is the Vermont Pension Investment Committee. So it is the current way that we structure the costs of managing these programs is through administrative fees, which are a fairly small percentage of the overall body's funds in order to manage them and serve the members who need to be served.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, do you have a problem?
Crystal Francisco, if I could just answer Senator Norris's question, the admin costs for the retirement systems do come out of the retirement budgets. There's actually an assumption, an actuarial assumption for admin costs that are baked into the ADAC. So whenever all of the costs are made about how much funds that go into the fund every year, a piece of the normal cost calculation reflects what we think the admin cost.
That's very common practice.
Very common.
All states doing that way. So,
I'm not familiar with any place that doesn't do it that way.
yeah, we try to do that. Okay. But you know,
All right. Thanks for bearing with me as my voice failed at an opportune time, but appreciate your patience.
Senator Weston?
Now,
No.
I know the answer.
And yeah, so we're gonna hear. Did you cover no, there's a position in VPEG that Eric is gonna. Go ahead, Mr. Henry.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your time this afternoon. My name is Eric Henry. I'm Chief Investment Officer for the Vermont Pension Investment Commission. We oversee about $8 billion for the 3 statewide pension plans. Our governor's recommended budget shows a 3% increase to support our ongoing operations. We're respectfully requesting your support for an additional position in anticipation of the provisions of H567. For VPIC, H567 would increase our asset base, complexity, and workload by transferring oversight of the OPEB assets or the post-retirement healthcare assets to VPIC. We've provided you with a copy of our testimony in the House and essentially outlining the complexity of managing these new assets side by side with pension assets, the benefits of doing so, and respectfully requesting that position. The House did include it in their budget. We would appreciate your support on it as well. We need this position really for to account for the increased level of complexity at VPIC and to provide an enhanced level of risk management, oversight, and strategic alignment of these assets with the OPEB liabilities. Our performance has been strong. Fiscal year 2025, another double-digit year with a 10.7% net return, well in excess of our 7% discount rate. For the second year in a row, our private equity program ranks #1 for the 10-year period among public pension funds nationwide. This follows 2024's fiscal year 2024's strong performance at 10.2% net, both years generating excess returns above and beyond that 7% actuarial discount rate, creating actuarial investment gains, lowering the unfunded accrued liability, and lowering the actuarially determined employer contribution. We continue our efforts to maximize long-term returns within prudent levels of risk and liquidity, but we're also seeking to assure that our investment strategies are sustainable through a 3-pronged approach. Number 1, we have an active proxy voting program in place where we vote the proxies on all the companies in which we invest in accordance with proxy voting guidelines that the Commission approves. Our engagement efforts with the boards and management teams of the companies in which we invest, we have a lot of quiet successes with these boards where we can get them to improve their governance and improve their sustainability of their performance without even getting to a proxy vote. And then finally, through building a long-term plan to support the decarbonation of VPIC's portfolio and, more importantly, the broader global economy. We believe these efforts are in the best interest of the members and beneficiaries of VSERS, VSTERS, and VMERS. At the end of the day, we're fiduciaries, my team and the commissioners, and we're focused solely and exclusively on maximizing returns for the exclusive benefit of the members of those pension plans. We also believe we have strategically aligned our investment strategies with the related pension liabilities and are prudently managing all these investment risks, including those that stem from non-financial factors such as climate change, fair labor standards, groupthink, the list goes on and on. We believe these are ultimately investment risks. We expect the management teams and the boards of the companies in which we invest to have prudent plans in place to manage them. We support the enactment of H567. We view the transfer of OPEB asset oversight to VPIC as good for the state, good for VPIC, good for the members and beneficiaries of the plan, and good for the taxpayers. Again, we do respectfully request your support for our additional position as included in the House budget. Happy to take any questions on our budget or returns or anything else related to VPIC.
Thank you. So the money would come from funds that you're managing, right? So there's no general fund.
Correct. Ultimately, our administrative budget is billed back to the pension plans, like those of the treasurer staff. We've benchmarked our operating costs. We are at about a fourth of what our peers are. Currently, our operating expense budget's around 4 basis points. Median for our peers would be more like 12 to 16. So we've been running a very lean operation in terms of administrative costs. There are only 4 investment professionals on the team. 4 full-time positions essentially would be asking for a fifth.
And so this is being managed now by the treasurer?
The OPEB assets, yes, are being managed by the treasurer's office. If 567 is enacted, oversight responsibilities for those assets would come to VPIC. The existing assets under the treasurer's oversight would come over to VPIC. We are in the midst of conducting an asset liability study on these OPEB liabilities now to assure that we have an investment strategy that's strategically aligned with those liabilities to assure that in the long run, again, we're maximizing the returns on those assets within prudent levels of risk and liquidity. This isn't just about maximizing returns. We do so with an eye also on levels of risk that are acceptable and prudent and levels of liquidity so that we're not forced to sell discounted assets in a period of an economic downturn in order to fund either benefit payments or capital calls for our private market investments. We spent a lot of time analyzing the liabilities of the plans, the assets within the plans, liquidity terms within every structure we're in. We've underwritten everything in the portfolio. We've begun that process now with the OPEB assets. At the end of the day, we want to understand what we're invested in and how each of those strategies contributes to funding those liabilities over the long run. We know that not all of our decisions will be good ones, but we don't ever want to be surprised by a negative outcome. And we believe we're in the situation where we've underwritten everything in the portfolio to the extent that we have a full understanding of the risks we face so that when things do go against us, again, we're not surprised by that.
Maybe this is a question for the treasurer's office. Is there a saving to the treasurer's office if they are no longer managing the OPEB?
There are some savings in the treasurer's office, and JFO has taken account of that. There's a contract that we had for review the assets. I forget exactly what the name of that was, but that is going to be transferred over to VPIC. And I think that was the primary piece that will saving that will be realized and go over to VPIC.
From VPIC standpoint, there are some savings opportunities. There's efficiencies in consolidating all of those consulting responsibilities with one firm and one contract. There are fee savings in having a larger asset base to invest, especially for the OPEB assets. The more investments we put with a manager, typically we can negotiate a lower fee. But we believe the real benefit of this is a higher level of scrutiny of those strategies, a higher level of strategic alignment of these assets with the liabilities which they're funding, and an ongoing level of oversight and underwriting of every strategy that these assets would be invested in side by side with the pension plan assets.
No savings to treasurer's budget because you were also taking funds from the funds to administrate?
there's still work that the treasurer's office does in terms of, if I understand, in terms of cash management and things like that. So there will still be staff work that is associated with these funds.
I just want to understand, basically, if we're creating a new position in VPIC, are we ending a position in the treasurer's office? Because that work is moving over to VPIC?
we are not proposing to end the position in the treasurer's office.
What's the problem?
Yeah, our, you know, I want to say this is that if the OPEB work had stayed in the treasurer's office, it had been our plan to ask for a position as well.
Okay.
Because the OPEBs are now pre-funded, and as a result, the assets under management are quite dramatically larger than they had been before they were pre-funded. So there is a very significant addition to the necessary work to manage those assets than had existed previously. And so, you know, VPIC is in the position now of being the one to ask for the position, but if it had stayed in the treasurer's office, we would have felt the need to ask for the same.
Okay. Did you have anything to say about that?
Christopher Fiscal, I was gonna say that in addition to everything David mentioned, this shift of OPEB to VPIC actually saves a little over $100,000 of general fund costs from the treasurer's budget, because the House moved $105,000 for the investment consulting contract over to VPIC. Treasurer's office, which currently holds that contract, had been funding that out of their general fund budget. When it moves over to VPIC, that will then get charged back to the retirement systems. So it is sort of in the big picture, a sort of neutral shifting of a bill to be paid from, you know, one entity to another, but it's actually lowering some general fund costs a little bit.
Okay, I think that's helpful. Any other questions for VPIC or the treasurer's office? I think it makes a lot of sense to make the transfer, the responsibility. I assume, no.
Yeah, the treasurer's office certainly supports that, believes that the best practice. Right now, the treasurer is effectively the sole fiduciary for what is becoming a very large fund, and we think it's much more appropriate to have a model.
VPIC's done a great job with the other funds, so assuming that the trend will continue with these. Okay.
I would add that the treasurer serves ex officio on VPIC and will continue to have a hand in what's being done.
Okay, great. All right. If there's no other questions or comments, we can let you go about your day managing the funds.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. Okay, Nicole. We're ready for you. Sorry, you have to wait. I'll let you introduce yourself. You're going to tell us about the ag fees.
I am. So for the record, my name is Nicole Duke. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. And I'm here to talk a little bit about our proposal that we put forward this year around MFO and LFO fees, the medium farm operation and large farm operation fees that are collected annually right now. So the proposal being that, as we all know, right, cost of things are rising, the cost of farming is going up. We have heard a lot from constituents, from farmers, that their costs are just going up and up and up and up, and that these fees are quite expensive for them, especially because there's not a huge number of them, right? So we have 35 large farm operations at $2,500 annually. And then we have 97 medium farm operations at $1,500 annually. So really the general idea is we feel like that would be a really impactful thing for the farmers, is to not have to pay that fee annually. And for a variety of reasons, some of them being that we don't really have comparable fees where we kind of just charge someone to farm or charge someone to do what they're doing on their land. We also have, you know, a lot of water quality programs where the farmers are working really hard to, you know, improve water quality, put in those pieces of infrastructure that they need to, working with our folks, working with NRCS, with the feds. So for all those reasons, we feel like it would be very impactful for the farmers to decrease the fee, and also the amount of revenue we bring in every year from these fees is around $231,500, I think was the quote in our proposal. And in the grand scheme of things, that really pays for, I would say, just equating it to a number of FTEs, about 2 FTEs, right? So we are using majority clean water board funding, right, to fund the operations of our ag water quality division. So with the administrative components of it within our business office and with the farmers having kind of one more thing to write up paperwork on, submit a fee, et cetera, we felt like the benefit of getting rid of the fee would be very impactful and would be to like overall, I know $231,000 is not a small sum of money, but for our overall budget, it felt like a good thing to do.
How large does a farm have to be considered medium and large?
Yeah, so I'm gonna try to get the numbers right here. In order to be a medium farm operation, we're talking a minimum threshold of 200 dairy cows, 300 young stocker heifers, or 150 horses, or there's combinations of those animals, right?
Do we have barns that have 150 or more horses? Seems like a huge farm.
I don't know off the top of my head for horses. I mean, I know more dairy.
Yeah. I know we have dairy more, a lot more than 200.
Yeah.
But I just can't mention them. I mean, I guess it's not that much. So the barn that I'm in is like 30 horses. It seems like a big barn.
I agree. That does seem like a lot.
I mean, large farm.
Yeah, so we're just talking if dairy numbers, 200 to 699 is medium farm. A large farm, you're talking 700 plus mature dairy cows, 1,000 cattle, which is the combination of heifers, cow calf pairs, or 500 plus horses.
And this doesn't have anything to do with the confined. There's a separate regulations about confined feeding operation, right?
Oh, yes, this has nothing to do with the confined animal feeding operations or CAFO
Yeah.
that we call it. That's separate. And if a farm had to get a CAFO permit, that's a separate cost, that's a separate thing. This is just a fee essentially to
By
farmers.
numbers. Okay. But in the CAFO, do you know what the CAFO fees are by chance? Are
I
they in the same level? Like, are you saying these are kind of out of whack?
believe that where we're at with that is the CAFO program and the permitting,
Okay.
is still being, I think there's a proposal, right? Like, I don't think that's finalized, and you just don't.
Is that the one that moved A&R or is it,
So,
that's just the water quality control?
so that, is designated, and I'm gonna give you by what I know,
Okay.
by EPA,
Right.
where if it gets to the level of a farm is a CAFO, it would be with A&R, but I believe they're still developing their permit program, so I don't know exactly what that fee is supposed to be, but
Is that a brief?
Two questions. First, if it's 250 or 30, whatever, is the proposal to absorb that in, the existing funds?
so the request would be to fill the hole that we would get from not, collecting the fees, the general fund.
So this is, I think it's good to have context.
Mhm.
So the governor has, essentially prohibited a fee bill that normally, when I started here 16 years ago, there was always a fee bill that went through the finance committee, and they raised fees so that we didn't have, a gap of 10 years where you didn't raise the fees and then you have to raise it a whole bunch. And the governor has made it very clear over those years that he doesn't want to raise the fees. So when occasionally we've had to do it, we've had to raise it like with automobile registration and that sort of thing. We've had to raise it a lot, at which point he complains as though we've done something horrible by raising the fee. But if you would let them rise at the normal pace, it would be a little bit here and a little bit. So what I'm worried about is this is an escalation of that. Now we not only can't raise fees, but he's asking that we use general fund to replace fees because it would be impactful for the farmers. So I guess my question is, we can't get a fee bill through without a veto. Why should we go along with the governor's request to eliminate fees and replace them out of other budgets.
So I don't think that I'm the one to answer the question, but I think,
Unfortunately, you're the one who's here.
and that's fine. I don't think I would not be comfortable speaking for the governor, but what I will say is this specific fee is on, like I said, it's 35 large farms and 96 medium farms. And we are at real risk of these farms holding this entire kind of burden on their shoulders that we could lose some MFOs. And so what I would say, this fee specifically, I would like to eliminate. That's not to say that there are not other fees, like I think we talked about pesticide registration, things like that, where ultimately the companies that are paying are these large scale conglomerate, pesticide, those things I understand. I think I would just hold this kind of out of that greater fee structure, in that there's so few people paying these fees and it's not comparable to our neighboring states, is why I personally feel like this is really
And-
important for our.
And in the absence of other factors, I might be motivated by that as well. But I guess what I'm saying is that the governor has set up a system where no one can pass a rise in fee, really, especially now with numbers in the Senate and the House, what they are, without threat of veto. And yet now it's as though we're starting to move back the other way and just eliminate fees on a piecemeal basis. So speaking only for myself, I would want to see some agreement with the administration on allowing a normal rise in fees to go forward before we begin the elimination of any fee class of fees. So maybe that's for other people, but as I say, you're the only person I can deliver that.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to give my disclaimer.
Yeah, sure.
For me, understood.
Senator Washington, you.
I do. I want to support what Senator Ruiz is saying. And also I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the logistics. Because the MFO and LFO fees, those fees otherwise go directly to the department to AAFM, or does that go to Clean Water Fund?
So they do support our ag water quality division.
Okay, ag water.
Of
Okay.
course.
For staff or for the clean water, for the grants you give out to farmers to clean water.
It's towards a combination of things, but it is mostly staffing, I believe. I'll double check that with our CFO. But yes, right now it's covering a portion of the ag water quality division budget. But most of the ag water quality budget is covered by clean water funds. So this is a fairly small percentage. I think 231,000 probably equates to, I think it's a 2 FTEs.
And so would you also anticipate, if this were to go forward, a reduction in the amount of the Clean Water Fund that is going to the Ag Water Quality Division because it's covered by general fund? Like, I guess I'm not sure about how that ask happens. Like, do you all ask for money from the Clean Water Fund, or do they say, oh, this needs to go, we'd like to support this work, so we're just gonna give them this money? What is that interaction like?
So the Clean Water Board develops the budget annually.
But is that developed through you asking for money, or is that developed through them going to you to say?
So it's a collaborative process between the board members, the chair, Agency of Natural Resources, and our representatives from the Ag Water Quality Division. It's not so much of an ask, honestly. In recent years, it's been more of a level funded conversation, but it's the board that decides where the money is distributed. And then this would be separate from that, of we're asking in our base budget appropriation to increase the general fund so that we could eliminate.
And well, okay.
But it's just that the clean water division is not for your other staff that just helps their farm. Yeah, that's all it's specific, the fees that they're paying were for clean water, basically.
Yeah.
It wasn't like pay staff, other.
Well, so it's for staff in that division. It covers portions of that cost. And then we also have other staff that, process the fees they come in, but it's kind of disseminated around our general operations.
Did you get grants out to farmers for do clean water project, right?
Yes,
Does that money, do you grant that from the fees?
that comes from clean water.
The clean water, which gets their money from the transfer tax or wherever they did, right?
Yeah.
Cause that was one of the debates we had, cause I thought it was what you were saying, that it goes. Why you need the 231 backfills, because you got position, but somebody said, no, if you need to backfill the clean water fund. Are those grants that you're giving out? That's not it.
No, that's separate. And so we have a multitude of programs that we support through Clean Water Fund, which essentially we use in many cases as like a state match to the comparable NRCS programs.
Okay. Nice. So I'd like to support what Senator Bruce said, but I'm not going to. But we're right. We don't want to move backwards, at least 3 years back. We don't want to do that. But the way I look at this, I'm frank. Farmers are struggling. They're already assessed enough fees for many different things. You look at the cost of fertilizer, you look at pesticides. It goes on and on and on. The cost of grain, what they're getting per hundredweight or after their milk and so on and so forth. It may not seem like a lot of money. Okay, but it does to them. Look at the cost of fuel oil right now going up. Planting season's coming. I think this would be a big hurrah for them to at least eliminate one of those fees. But having said that, is there any other profession or whatever else that buys into this besides farmers that has to pay a fee because they got 700 cows or a combination of 700? And so why just farmers? Because they've come a long way in cleaning up what they do as far as the continued phosphorus runoff and so on and so forth. They've been working with ANR, so on and so forth. And I just think that in these times, it's almost like we should reward them for their efforts as far as, yeah, you've been doing a good job. We want you to keep it up. These money is still available, but I think it's time to, no one else is cutting them great. 1,500 per hundred was what's the price back in 72. They're still getting it today. And we're losing farms on a monthly basis here in Vermont. But I think it's a small step in the right direction to say thank you for what you do.
But couldn't we thank lots of people in the state by getting rid of fees? Cannabis farmers?
We could, but the issue at hand is the farmers, that's what we're talking about.
No, understood, but I guess what I'm saying is the administration is picking one fee in an opportune moment and saying, let's acknowledge these people and get rid of the fee. Then the general fund has to make that up, so it comes out of the hides of everybody, and everyone else continues to pay the fees. So we're all paying fees to drive our cars, or I mentioned cannabis. If you're from the inside or outside, you're paying a fee, a pretty stiff fee. So, back to my point about the general health of all of our programs, they're meant to run on fees, so that the fee pays for the administration of the program. If we begin a process of saying, well, thank you to you farmers, thank you to other folks, and we eliminate those fees and start paying them out of the general fund, I just feel like we're moving backwards, and there won't be an opportunity other than with a dramatic payment shift to go back to the system where fees are paying for the administration of the programs that they're involved in. So obviously nothing against farmers, nothing against people who drive their car and pay a fee for that. But fees are a fact of life. But again, I feel that the governor has, with a no taxes, no fees policy, he's put us in a position over a decade or more where when eventually you can't run the programs anymore, we have to do these, like we had to do with automobile fees. You have to raise them way more than would make logical sense. And at that point, it becomes a political issue because people say, oh my God, it's a 300% increase in my automobile registration. But that's because the governor refuses on a regular schedule to raise that fee a little bit. And
So
so,
worse than raising the fee for using boat access. And also for electric vehicles, yeah.
yeah, well, again, piecemeal.
Could I offer, and I love to just elaborate a little bit on what Senator Morris is saying though, in that these farmers have done a lot for water quality for the state in general, right? Like a lot of what they do with the programs they participate in, the phosphorus reduction, the changing of infrastructure on their farms to support clean water for the state as a whole and not specifically their farm. And so it feels like charging them a fee specifically to farm, which I don't see that we have a comparable fee or in other professions in this way, feels different.
Do you know if this was,
than-
if this large immediate operation fee was part of the whole clean water fund, the construct for funding it?
Yes.
That's why it was enacted.
It was an active then, yep.
But there are lots of fees for lots of professions, right? I mean, do we need farmers more than we need lawyers or more than, I think when you get into that game, trying to prefer one profession over the other, it falls apart immediately. So they do a lot of things for us, but all of our professions do things for us. Teachers, for instance, they have to pay licensing fees. We don't say, you know, our teachers have gone through a tough year, let's get rid of their fees and pay for them out of the general fund. The governor would veto that. But farmers are, I hate to say it, but in an election year, it would be a big thing to go out and say, I got rid of your fees. But other people are gonna have to pick that up through not getting that general fund money. So, again, nothing against farmers and they work super hard. But I know a lot of people in wild fields who work super hard. And so I don't see that they are a special class who should go without their traditional fees. Maybe a reduction or something, but eliminating them just seems whimsical to me.
The other question I was gonna ask you, you could, the fact that is like, what would happen if we didn't backfill? We did lower the fees, but didn't hit that 230,000 to the agency of overhead. Maybe you could answer right now. You have to lay two people off.
Yeah, I would have to look back at our budget. It would certainly leave us a $231,000 hole in general fund. How we would have to make cuts would be an exercise that we would have to do internally across our divisions.
I would be interested in hearing the results of that.
You could just email,
Yeah.
if you have it, if you want to. The guess of what you'd have to do or some examples.
Yeah, we could do that for sure.
I think we could debate this all out.
We could, if I could.
Senator Bruce opinion, we could.
Then we have Secretary of State could talk about other fees if they want lowered. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, we appreciate it.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
If you're ready, Lauren, we can have you
Okay, great.
go ahead.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good. For the record, my name is Lauren Hibbert. I'm the Deputy Secretary of State and it's happy to come talk to you today. I think on H 211, which narrow scope of things to talk to you about.
We're concerned about 211 as it relates to 951 of the budget.
Yes.
So I don't know what else, I don't know.
Well, there's fees being raised in this bill, and there's an $50,000 allocation to our office to study data brokers and the ability for our office to create for Vermonters an ability to delete themselves from data brokers, which is a functionality that currently does not exist, like a public portal for Vermonters to enter to ask for their data to be deleted.
Oh, like a do not call one.
Exactly. And there's one other jurisdiction, California, who has robust data broker registration and jurisdiction over data brokers, and they are working on a portal like this. And so on the House side, there was an ask for that to occur, and an ask for us to create that. But really, there's no jurisdiction in the nation that has that functionality yet. We don't know what it would cost. We don't know what would be required. We have concern about gathering all that PHI from Vermonters because we would have to gather basically all of Vermonters' most sensitive data to transfer it to data brokers to have them identify that this is the person that you need to delete. So we have concerns and didn't want to promise that we could do that. And so this is an interim measure to study those mechanisms, and we are asking because of capacity that we be allotted or allocated rather $50,000 so that we can hire an outside group to do this assessment because of the bandwidth within our current office.
And so right now there are data brokers that need to register.
Yes, and this bill is also increasing their fee from $100 to $900.
Is
So
that
they're
in the budget, that increase fees, or just the 50,000?
I don't know. I know that fee increase was considered, but whether it's reflected in the budget, I don't know.
That would show up in your
It would show up in our
PR.
it's in the Secretary of State Special Fund. So we have two funds. One is the Secretary of State Special Fund, which is the Business Services Fund, Business Services Division, which primarily funds, and we fund elections, business services, the SARA, and a lot of our administration costs there. And then we have the OPR Special Fund, which is just licensing fees.
Well, this is a registration fee, not a license fee.
And it's within our Business Services Division, which is why it's not an OPR fund.
Do you know how many data brokers you have?
Yes, I do. We have approximately, just had it, 283.
And do you know what, like, can you give me an example?
Yeah, that a classic data broker is, it could be LexisNexis, it could be,
So any data.
it's big data companies that move our data from one, and then like a hotel chain will buy the data from the data broker. Credit card, the Experience, like huge data broker.
And to operate in states that need to register like other
Yeah.
businesses.
They do, but there's smaller data brokers as well. There's the big ones, Experience.
Probably not a lot of sympathy for the data brokers fees.
No, and
Dairy farm.
no,
Maybe we call them data farm.
data farm, yeah. Well, they are kind of data farms in a way,
Not a good way.
not in a good way, yeah. Although, it's interesting because they do in some ways make our lives easier. So it's that push-pull of fees versus like everyone knows everything that you ever purchased. But these fees are being increased in similarity to other states' fees. And the other important thing that's happening in this bill, although I don't think it has a huge budget impact, is a data broker is going to have a new requirement, which is a bond. And so if they fail to register or they fail to renew, the Attorney General will start to be able to get enforcement out of their bond as opposed to, so it simplifies their enforcement and the increase in fees to support the enforcement costs.
And the 50,000 for a consultant to help you study how you do this deletion mechanism. Or if it's even possible.
Or if it's even possible. And I think the ultimate goal, I'm not presupposing what the outcome should be, is that maybe California would have a subscription where we could send Vermonters to them. They would build it and we would go there. We would send Vermonters there with their security lawyers. That would be my ideal, but let's see. But I don't get you stuff.
Sending Vermonters to California might have been.
We have to come up with a better legislative pitch. We don't want to send Vermonters to California, but
Yes.
but like they would come in through our portal, their data.
Just to visit, just to get their
Yeah.
data.
Utilize that big fifth largest economy in the world, money,
Right.
and not our little state's money. It's not.
Good thing.
The fees and appropriation are in the bill.
not in the budget.
But the appropriation, because this, the
It's accounted for in
The,
In the
the
big
fifty
bill.
thousand is accounted for, but not the increase in fees and the Secretary of State's budget.
right, so the fees and the appropriation are all in H 211,
Right.
but it is accounted for in the big bill in terms of money available.
From Secretary of State's office budget, we get that increased fee money, does that account? Probably not, like a negative, kind of like we just talked about with, that was that other one.
There's no reduction.
There's no reduction.
Right.
Because there, but there could be in other instances, because they have more money coming in.
Sure.
But since they're gonna give it to the AG's office for enforcement, it doesn't run out your budget.
We may do that, or depending on the outcome of the study, we'll use it to build, something for,
Is it,
um,
well, it's not tons of money, that's like if you have 900 of them.
yeah,
Paying $800 more.
yeah, it's a total of, almost $250,000. But we use this money for supporting, and the way that the Secretary of State is established and runs is all our business services income supports the core functions of the Secretary of State. We don't receive,
But it's a little less pressure on the money that you're getting for that. If you get 250 more from the.
right, yeah, it will give us a little bit more breathing room for all of the
You can send us
programs.
a direct app again.
Well, it's on the table always, but we're finding, and I'm sure that you have seen, we do have some language related to the Secretary of State Special Fund that I'm sure you'll want to hear from us on the ability for us to meet, with, the fiscal committees in the fall so that we can give a forecast of what we are able to contribute to the general fund as opposed to an immediate give access to the general fund. And not to get into that testimony.
Is that in the bills?
It's
I
in-
think the secretary mentioned it when. she
Yeah.
did. I don't know if we have language
It is in the bill that came to you from the House.
too long.
Yeah, no, not 211, the budget bill. 950, I need to memorize that number.
Well,
The
we
number's
have it
not in
written
my
on the
head all
board,
the
so
time.
we-
Yeah, that's what,
Up there.
yeah, 9,
So that link there, that's in there.
it is, and when you're ready to hear Secretary of State budget testimony, we'll talk about that, but that was the, but I'll forecast for you, that was the ask. We wanted to create an IT capital fund. And in talking that through with joint fiscal, there was a strong desire for us not to create another special fund, SOS IT capital fund, but instead to build that capacity within the SOS general fund, special general fund. And then, have a conversation with you folks in the fall about what the plan is for any excess money and what is going towards future IT builds. And the rationale there is just, the majority of our business is based in an IT platform, whether it's elections, business services, or professional licensing. We're able to be as lean and mean and efficient as we are because of our IT systems. We've been very fortunate on our implementations and the services that we're able to provide and the modernization that we've been able to do. But we're going to need to continue to do so.
Because right now, if you need money, you come to the general fund and say, we need $5 million for this IT project, but you would like to kind of build up your own fund to
Yeah.
use for those projects.
Yes.
JFO said they'd rather need it.
They said that they would rather that we keep any money from year to year in the Secretary of State fund as opposed to create as another special fund for tracking and outage. That was their preferred.
Yeah, so we have to fill out the special. fund.
Yeah.
We can more track.
And just for the record, I don't think the Secretary of State has come to this body in any recent year to ask for an allocation for an IT spend. I think we've been, for the election space, so elections, lobbying and campaign finance, we have had, the federal grant monies, which we've been able to carry over and build those systems. And for our business services, we were able to build it in 2 years with spacing in time. The OPR modernization of an IT system, without a capital fund, we would need to come to the legislature and ask for money. It's a very big, complicated system. And the OPR budget was running at a deficit. And we just don't know, particularly with federal funds, whether we're going to continue to have the same stream of money to support election activity. It does not appear so.
Okay. Good to know. With that, the language in that house. That's
Yes.
as you. Being able to keep it in.
With,
Secretary space.
it does, and then with, sort of mandatory conversation, I'm blanking, I wasn't totally prepared to talk about it, but the committee that have, the joint fiscal committee that happens in fall.
Yeah.
We would come speak to you.
You're prepared to talk about farmers fees?
No.
Okay.
I'm gonna stay away from farmers and rural land if you don't mind.
Yeah, good idea. Okay, so any other questions of the Secretary of State's office? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Nice to see you all.
Yes. Okay, we have any discussion, which was just to remind the committee that I'm trying to put this bill by next Friday. So,
11?
A week from Friday.
Oh,
a week from Friday,
9:51, okay.
9:51.
17. We haven't received to 11 yet.
Yeah. No, I don't know if we will see two of them.
Just come off
They
the floor on
took
27.
the money out of it.
We'll see it.
They could, have the money.
We'll see it.
I thought maybe they. Okay. No, not the bills, just the budget. So if there's bills that come after we do the budget, they're just out of line. Which is what we were talking about earlier. If you have bills in your committee that aren't in the house, that don't have money in the house version of the government version, then you want to figure out how to do that.
My dear ones.
I can't think of anything.
Yeah. So if there's any specific things that you want to make sure they're in the budget, or things that the House did or that the governor did that you really either don't like or really do like, good to talk to me or write on the list. That's what we're gonna be figuring out by next Friday.
Yeah, I know it's a couple of senators not here, but I just wanted to inquire as to the general consensus of a lot of positions requested this year. Well, we also could, not what that specified in particular, a lot of positions requested this year.
A lot of limited service asking to be made.
Yeah, one-time allocation, now they want, we've had that discussion full time now.
Yeah.
That's automatic, right? That's it. For if it's limited service, then come back the next year, ask for.
Yeah, when the limited service gets near its end. But they can keep limited, they can do a 2-year limited service and then do another 2 years, then another 2 years.
Probably do.
At some point they say, they want to.
I guess when it's all said and done, I'd like to see the request for position.
Yeah, we do have,
Totality,
maybe this week Amy will present her table.
it's time to prioritize that or.
Yeah, that would
Not
be good.
all of it.
Yeah. That would be good. We did that last year. We had positioned, because it was one of the things we got in the DRJ letter was like, wow, there are too many positions. So that wasn't specifically called out this year, but.
We could get ahead of it.
Yeah, and I think it's something, there's a shared concern, just the long-term impacts. It would be good to know if anybody in the committee feels strongly in agreement with the governor on not taking the 9 million of interest out of the tech mod fund, which the House did. Because that's how they fund a big chunk of the things that they funded. So if you don't do that, you gotta strip out $9 million projects, allocations, appropriations.
Do we know how strongly he feels about that, or maybe that's probably.
Yeah, it was in the letter. It was the first thing I think mentioned in the letter, actually. So I don't know if it's in priority by the nation, but and we could also take more testimony on that. I mean, the fund still has like $11 million in this, something like that. Well, this 9 million was interest that was earned on the money. If that matters to you, but that's how they were able to fund a lot of the, social services funding, the deaf and blind, private Meals on Wheels, all those kind of increases. Big reason why they're able to do a lot of that stuff.
Does feel like it's the first element in the letter. That's not precisely a veto threat over it, but
Yeah, I think Gresham's line, although as you wrote down on your piece of paper there, he had a lot of strong word in his line that day, but I think he did say it was a red, that was a red line. He called it.
Yeah,
But I don't know, sometimes people's red lines are,
and maybe, you know, who knows, we cut it in half. And found 4.5 million elsewhere. Maybe that would be acceptable, but
I think it'd be good to be prepared for that. I guess the first thing is property tax increase, it's the first thing on the letter. So the diverting IT funds, it wasn't the first one. Property taxes, then just overall higher spending. But that would make a very difference if we got, you don't want to get to the end, at least I don't want to get to the end of the week and say like, well, we're also not going to support that because then we have to find $9 million.
well, oh, go ahead, Bob.
I'm sorry. My question was, so I believe it was Ways and Means that cut it to $52.5 million, right?
Yes,
And then it went to appropriation. Where does that go to here?
It's what,
it's a two-step, what Ways and Means did on the buy down. Or did a
oh, right, yeah,
two-year process.
yeah.
Which I'll just, this will be my position, that's crazy. I think we should buy down to the level the governor wants, because if we don't, he will veto. He's already issued a veto for the yield bill and the budget, and we will wind up giving him that level of buy down anyway. So why not begin from that? Because he's leaving 4% average on the table, which is more than I thought he was going to recommend leaving. So what the House is doing, obviously it makes some fiscal sense. I don't think it makes sense in terms of what the governor's announced positions are. I would support full buy down that the governor is looking for and examining ways to get the 9 million at least down by half, if not all the way. So
Would you want to find this in cuts or find the money somewhere else?
I got $2.5 million.
Okay, good.
I'll talk about tomorrow.
Okay. Nice. Okay, yeah, you can also find one. You know,
I could find a lot of money. Some folks might not like it.
okay,